services are funded in part by the general fund, but also through revenues that the statute requires to be collected from taxes paid through the telco companies. We have with us today a number of folks who are going to talk to us about ongoing efforts to potentially reclaim underpaid revenues from the telcos for statute. We have engaged these gentlemen in discussions, preliminary discussions, exchanged draft documents for potential cooperation. These, of course, need to be considered and reviewed by our Board of Commissioners. We're here today to talk about the enterprise, what's involved, and give our commissioners a chance to ask questions and get clarifications so they can make an informed decision. So without further ado, Mr. Eckhart?
Yes, I'm Dave Eckhart. I'm with a company called Phone Recovery Services. And, you know, just to kind of back up in terms of how I even got involved in this, because my background is actually investment banking and have been in municipal finance for years and years. A good friend of mine by the name of Jerry Gray, who was chief of staff to Roy Barnes when he was governor of Georgia, called me about 2 years ago now and started to explain to me this whole area of, you know, the fact that the phone companies were not properly collecting surcharges and remitting them to municipalities. At the time we were talking about was they had found this out down in Alabama. And then the assumption was that it was probably going on nationwide. So Jerry said, look, Dave, I know you've been in the municipal finance industry for a long time and you've got a lot of friends around the country. You know, if this is real, I think there's an opportunity elsewhere. So, you know, I know Jerry, he's a good guy, but, you know, I wanted to look into it. So I started to do some of my own research. And one of the first people I called happened to be Tim Carson, who was on my right over here with Dilworth Paxson, which is one of the, you know, largest law firms in Philadelphia. And I explained the whole situation to Tim. You know, each state has a different act, but they're very similar. We've actually, you know, done a lot of work and research on Pennsylvania's old act and now their new act. And we were very involved in that, which, you know, we can get into some of that if you'd like. I mean, one of the things that we were, did a lot of work on is when the first rendition of the new bill came out, the phone companies had inserted amnesty for themselves going back in terms of, you know, their failure to collect proper remittances in the past. And we, you know, through an effort on our part and with the help of a number of the counties in CCAP and also Delaware County in particular, we got that language removed.
That was going to be one of my first questions, is whether the new law, you know, kind of like puts us in a situation where we can't move forward.
No, we're good.
That's now been.
We're good. We got that removed. And I mean, there are some things about the new law that we can get into that, you know, should be discussed that affect in effect the line counts. But in any event, what I did is I did some research with Tim and I talked, and we were like, well, gee, this is like, it's not the phone company's money. You know, why wouldn't they collect it and remit it? It doesn't cost them anything. And we started looking into it, and the reason is a couple reasons. The main reason is it's a very competitive market, and anything they can do, particularly with their multi-line businesses, to keep the phone bills down, they like to do. And as one competitor started to, in effect, cheat on what they were charging in surcharges, they all kind of felt forced to do that. And I had the Dilworth guys pull out their phone bill, you know, and look at it, you know, a law firm with 200 lawyers or so. And
about 250 phones.
Yeah,
Just our Philadelphia.
And even with the discounts that are available under the old act, and there are some in the new act as well, they should have been charged somewhere around, you know, I think it was like $150 a month. They were getting charged $10 a month. Okay, so we started saying, boy, that's interesting. So we started.
All this is completely against my best interest from my office manager's standpoint.
Short term.
So, you know, one of the handouts I've given you was this one, okay, which kind of highlights some of this. This information here is coming from actual phone bills from people in Pennsylvania, one of which is actually, I believe, in your county, which I don't think they want me to mention who they are, because these were kind of given to us privately. But, if you look at these, they're all different carriers, and what you find as you study this is the top one up here, which is the one I was mentioning with 250 lines. This is the Saul Ewing phone bill. Here we have the second one, which is, a Windstream is the provider. Here there's a company with 1,000 phone lines, and even with their discounts, they should be paying $292. They were charged $3 last month. Okay, so this is the sort of thing we were finding from the phone bills. What we did find is some of the phone bills are getting properly collected, but where that's been occurring is where people have, like 15 or fewer phone lines. Then they seem to be collecting properly. Once somebody gets over a certain number of lines, it just nobody seems to be collecting properly. Another thing that highlights that is the other handout that I've given out, which is this other paper. And it's funny, because you almost don't need to get into this whole presentation and we can talk about it. But what this was is, these are the phone carriers in Delaware County, okay? And, our initial look at Delaware County, we had thought that Delaware County was being under-remitted to the tune of about $3.2 million. Well, after they hired us and we really started to dig and got the real information, it turns out that we believe their under-remittances annually are $6.9 million a year.
Wow.
Okay.
Double what you initially.
Double what we initially thought. Now, in your case, our 30,000-foot view, as we call it, we have you at about 1.6 million a year in under remittances per year. If Delaware County's facts hold true, it could be more than that. But we've tried to be conservative in our estimates. Under the, depending on which type of, and now I'm going to, probably should have Tim take over on this, but depending on what law you look at in terms of statute of limitations, whether it's contract law or just, the straight up liability, or I don't know what it's called, but you can go back a minimum of 2 years and as many as 6. We don't think there's any way you could go back more than 6 years in terms of the damages against the phone carriers. And to make it clear, we're not really collecting the surcharges that they didn't collect. In effect, we are, though, because what we're doing is we're going after the phone companies for damages for not having collected the proper amounts. So we're going to go after them for what they should have collected, but we're not really going to be going and getting the remittances from the individual, mostly businesses. This is not, it shouldn't affect the businesses' phone bills going back. They're not going to go to their businesses and say, we're going to charge you for the fact that we didn't charge you. It's going to be a damage from the phone company that's going to have to pick up. Now, obviously, some of the businesses, their phone bills should go up and will go up if the phone companies start collecting the proper amounts. But when you're looking at a law firm that's got 250 phone lines, their monthly bill's $156 for this surcharge. They can afford that. They just can't. It's not that big a deal to most of the businesses that we're talking about, and frankly, they don't even know they're not being charged properly. So, but going forward, if in fact the phone carriers do start collecting the proper amount, which is what this effort's all about, the phone bills will go up a little bit to the business, most of the businesses. What we have been finding in our research is the individuals, cell phones, home phones, the people who have fewer than 10 phone lines have been getting charged properly, and they've been carrying the 911 system. I mean, unfairly, frankly, because on top of that, you've had to probably dip into your general funds to meet the needs. But if you look at this sheet here again, what's really interesting is the left column are and this is just for business lines, are the business lines that we've been able to identify that are active business lines that should be charged the 911 surcharge, okay? Now, discounts apply for the businesses that have more than, 50 phone lines, but again, we've included that in our calculations. If you look at Verizon at the top, and this is based again on Delaware County numbers, they've got 244,000 active phone lines. They've been remitting on only 126,000 of them, and this is annual now. We're just talking about annually. So it looks to us as though the shortfall by Verizon is like close to 1.4 million a year. Okay, and they're pretty good. If you go to the next one, XO, you have to understand there's a lot of these carriers that you guys probably haven't heard of, that your 911 people have. But XO has got 75,000 active phone lines, and last month they remitted on 1,800 of them. That's all. Okay, I mean, and some of these are even worse. I mean, you look at bandwidth here with 37,000 active phone lines, they're not remitting anything. So it's I don't know how they can argue that, these facts here as we're digging them out. And it's going to take time, and we're going to have a legal process that we're going to have to employ. One of the problems with the existing law, or the old law, I should say, because the new law actually doesn't take effect until August 1st, was that there was no audit provision. You couldn't audit these phone companies. So even when you went to try and get the data from them, you couldn't get it. So
there was a legislative study done in 2012 by the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee in Harrisburg, bipartisan committee of the General Assembly, and it's 200 pages about the state's 911 system. And one of the primary questions they had was, well, how is this, what's the integrity of the revenue stream, if you will? And they went to the telephone companies, with the aura, the power of the General Assembly, and the telephone companies basically just
stonewalled them.
Pound sand, stonewalled them, and said we're protected from we have confidentiality provisions in this law, and it's proprietary information. It's all confidential, and thank you for the phone call, but we can't help it.
What is interesting is through the process of actually, working on what we thought was important to go into the new legislation, the Verizon people admitted to the Delaware County folks that they'd only been collecting $5 per multi-line system known as a PRI. Okay, when under the existing law, it should have been $23 per PRI. They admitted to that. Okay, so we know there's real action here. We were fairly confident in our numbers, particularly with regard to Delaware County now. We have been to probably 16 or 17 counties in Pennsylvania at this point. We have Delaware County, who's actually filed a lawsuit against the 19 carriers that are listed on this page. And I actually have a copy of that complaint if Larry, you'd like that. Did we send this to you, Larry? Okay. It's actually, it's a good read because it gives you a lot of facts in terms of what we determined down in Delaware County. Berks County is now signed up. Dauphin County is signed up. We have an action going in Allegheny County. At this point, we believe that the following counties who we've all spoken to will be signing up within the next couple of weeks, which would include Lancaster, which we're on their agenda for next week, Chester, which we're on their agenda for next week, Bucks County, Northampton, Lehigh, Westmoreland, Beaver, Butler, Washington counties. I probably missed one or two, but there's a lot of people, and honestly, we've made some efforts through CCAP and PEMA to try and consolidate it, and have had little success in getting them to agree to do it. And if they do, which maybe they will when we get enough counties signed up, You know, we still think because of the fact, particularly that the new language is going to take effect on August 1st, that the statute of limitations starts to run and us going back under the old law where most of the recoverable dollars are for you. Again, I say recoverable, I should, probably say damages, where most of the recoverable dollars are under the old act. So, because we don't know how they're gonna behave under the new act yet. But,
What you're suggesting is that, time is of the essence?
Right.
Okay.
right, and what,
In essence, what you end up doing because of the statute of limitations, without getting too far into the legal weeds, is that as of August 1, you're playing under the new rules. Telephone companies are playing under the new rules, and some of those rules have been liberalized a little bit for them. One in particular with respect to VoIP. So to the extent that you start the statute of limitations from a time after August 1, you're basically trading post-August 1 days, which are days with less mischief, if you will, for the back-end days where we know there was more mischief. So it's not the end of the world, but you have to understand that, and a lot of counties are kind of waking up with our help and saying, well, geez, can you get something filed for us by August 1? And typically that would be filing a complaint by August 1. But we have come up with a procedural device using a writ that we think that even if we can't get all the information that we need for your complaint by August 1, we think we can toll the statute as long as we can get the writ filed and shortly thereafter follow up with the complaint. So,
which would be the goal anyway.
yeah, so that would take care of you from a statute of limitations standpoint and have your damages be all pre-August 1, 2015 damages.
So what we have found is that this is not a problem just Pennsylvania has. We actually, have actions going in over 20 states now. And it's the same problem everywhere. And it's, and I can get into a lot of the details, but it's remarkable how, how unconcerned and, how little real due diligence the phone companies have done in terms of actually collecting these surcharges. And often, a lot of them have hired outside accounting firms to sign their remittances. And all that the accounting firm has done is they've taken the number of remittance dollars that the phone company has sent into the county in this case, or PEMA, because it's going both places. And they've just divided that by the surcharge and said, well, that's how many clients there must be. They didn't even look into seeing whether or not there were the proper people being billed. I mean, it's unbelievable. But in any event, we're moving forward in a number of places. We've actually had some settlements with some of the phone companies. In fact, Verizon, to mention one, just settled with Birmingham, Alabama, over this exact same issue just 2 weeks ago. As has a cable company called Charter, and a few. There's a few others, and we've won court cases on this in the federal court system in Georgia. So
there's actually a little bit of, it's an interesting story, but as to how all this happened, Dave mentioned that he got a phone call and so forth. Well, the Rosetta Stone, if you will, the guy who originally uncovered all this was a computer scientist in Alabama by the name of Roger Schneider. And Roger had a firm down there, and he's a very distinguished guy in the computer science world, doing such things as handling, he was the technology chief for 3 different Democratic national conventions and that kind of stuff. I mean, but a very accomplished guy. And he came back to Birmingham. In fact, the Clinton guys, after he did that, they had him come into the White House and set up the whole system for how the Clinton White House would accept resumes of people who wanted to work in the administration, have them evaluated and so forth. He set up the whole system for that. But anyway, he comes back to Birmingham, and actually to Huntsville, where his office is, and somebody comes up to him a month or two after he comes back and says, well, you've got all this technological, we've got this 911 board, and our costs are much greater than the revenue stream. Would you consent to coming on the board? Basic thing that we all do, no compensation or anything. So he's on the board for about 6 months, and he's going to move his office, and he's got like 23 phones or something in his office, and he's going to move it a couple of blocks down. So he goes out and gets a couple of proposals for new telephone systems. And he's looking at these things, and he's been paying 23 911 charges, one per phone. And he's starting to look at this, and he's got one that comes in, they're only going to charge him one. Another one comes in, they're going to charge him 5. But nobody's going to charge him more than 10 for the 23 phones. And he starts going back to these guys and to his board. He says, I don't know what's going on here, but look at this stuff that doesn't make any sense. So the board says, well, there they have the ability to do a public audit, which we don't have in Pennsylvania.
But we do now.
We do now under the new law. So anyway, they authorized him to go in and do an audit. When he goes in and he finds all this mischief happening and so forth. So this is how the first
And sued Bell South from Huntsville, sued Bell South and won, and that's how it all
in
came.
federal court down there, and so that was the genesis of how this all started. But and what Roger's been able to do very importantly is by his knowledge of, when you set up a national political convention, you have 8,000 votes or something, which you have to take care of and all this. So with his knowledge of all the information sources that are out there with respect to the whole telecommunications industry, he's been able to put together a methodology which basically has all these bits of information that are out there, which he's able to go in. And a lot of it we have to pay for, but you grab pieces of information and you almost build a mosaic which shows you what the telephone company the landscape looks like with respect to telephone line counts in your county. So that's what he's doing, and he's able to do on his own what that legislative committee of the Pennsylvania legislature couldn't do because they got stonewalled by the phone companies. So the phone companies are looking at a lot of exposure nationally, but they're very well funded. They're very well politically connected and so forth, and we saw that going through the process in Pennsylvania. And it's going to be a formidable adversary, but we know that there's mischief that's been done, and it's apt to take a little time to get it, but we think
So, with that in mind, what we're here to do is, we've entered into contracts with a number of counties in Pennsylvania and other states. And we're looking to work with the county. What our proposal would be is a fully contingent basis, in that if we don't recover anything for the county, we're not going to cost you anything. We think that what we proposed, because of all the work that it's going to entail on our part, forensic accountants and buying the data and fighting these guys. We think that on a contingency basis, what we're proposing is 40% of what we recover is fair, and that's what the other counties have been signing on with us. In fact, not only it's been on in other states as well, and we're hoping that you guys are interested in working with us, and we'd love to get going and get moving, and that there is some time factor that, it does behoove you to probably move and get moving before August 1st if you can. So we're here, and we'd love to do this work with you, and I don't know what other questions you might have. We did put a presentation together, which I didn't even go through, but we provided you guys a couple weeks ago, and happy to answer any questions you have. We look forward to working with you and your council and your 911 folks which I'm assuming you probably talked to them some, and they're frustrated by this whole process too. The numbers have been going down. The reason that is that more and more of the stuff is becoming void. And if you look at what these void carriers have been doing, there's many of them that are charging next to nothing. Not to mention some of the oddballs out there like Magic Jack and Uma and folks like that, like down in Huntsville, Alabama, where we sued Magic Jack. They admitted that they haven't charged a 911 fee to any of their clients nationwide. Ever.
I have them on here, and I pay 911 charges every month.
Do you really?
Yes.
That's interesting, because who do we know that has Uma that hasn't been getting charged? But anyway, but frankly, those guys are, they're small potatoes in the whole scheme of things. Magic Jack might have, I forget how many, but it's several million clients nationwide, just not a lot of people.
The biggest carrier, of course, is Verizon.
Verizon's the biggest one.
They're like 54% of the Pennsylvania market and so forth. But the advantages for the counties are really twofold. One, going back and getting the damages for what we hope will be as much as 6 years. There's getting between 2 years under tort theories to 6 years. It requires some creative lawyering and so forth. But we're gonna shoot for the 6 years. But you have those damages, back damages, if you will. But you're also then, because of your actions, putting in place an enhanced revenue stream for the future. So that's
Yeah, hopefully they'll behave themselves going forward, getting caught here. Yeah, that would be our hope to see that happen for you.
Well, I did have an opportunity to review the Legislative Budget and Finance Committee report. They were pretty thorough in terms of covering all the different issues, including, are we getting the best efficiency out of all of our 911 systems?
Oh yeah, that's a big part of it.
But I can tell you here, one of our arguments with our points, if you will, with our legislators to support the new fee legislation was that, we have, essentially tried to do what we can to squeeze every ounce of efficiency out of our 911 operation. In fact, a lot with our chief clerk's assistants, we were able to essentially eliminate through attrition top-heavy administration, and we're looking to save over the next 3 years somewhere in the neighborhood of 800. But when I was listening to in particular, and you said 1.6 million is what was under remitted, and that number is somewhere probably, Dana Best is here, our director of finance, but that number is somewhere about 1/2 or more than 1/2 of our property tax subsidy right now for 911.
Yeah, you gotta dip into your general funds to meet the need, right?
And as you know, you're not alone.
Yeah.
There are very few, maybe at this point,
I think
the number may be 0 of counties that are actually covering.
I think Delaware County is dipping into their general fund to the tune of $6 million or something.
7.5.
So it's common.
And I know that, I'm sorry Commissioner Cross can't be here today, but she was as the chair of the governance committee at CCAP last year. And our number one priority was the 911 bill at CCAP. And to a county and to a commissioner, I think this was very important to us because we're all faced with the same situation. Dwindling revenues from 911 as the costs to operate these systems, especially when we start to talk about getting into next generation technology. These costs are going to keep going up.
And a lot of it's mandated by the
efficient as
FCC.
possible.
A lot of it's mandated by the FCC.
Yeah. But, so I was pleased, and I'm pleased that it was a couple months back, and in fact, that we had a discussion at this. I ended up being appointed chairman of the Assessment and Taxation Committee at CCAP, which put me on the board of CCAP, and we had a discussion about this. I did with several of our commissioner colleagues from Lancaster and from Dauphin, and they were discussing this attempt by the telcos to put this amnesty language into the legislation so that counties could do this. So I'm glad our legislators, did do that, and you're telling me that essentially we have the ability to go after and recover what was legitimately owed to us if we want to pursue this.
Yes, that language was removed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have what I saw here was it's a proposed engagement letter, and then there's a professional service contract. And I guess at this point, I just want to ask, Larry, has our solicitor had a chance to?
Yes, there was one small modification that the gentleman accommodated and sent us back the revised version. So yes, he has seen it and he is in agreement with the revision that is requested.
Okay, and you guys you know what the revision is?
Yeah, oh no, we worked through it, and it was a minor revision. So.
And I did notice, to kind of follow what's going on in Dauphin County, and they apparently have now moved forward from what I read in the newspaper.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, they, at a county commission meeting, approved our contracts.
The only other question I had, and I'm going to Commissioner Eichelberger, trying to ask a question. Were these fees that were collected and not remitted, or were these fees that were not collected and not remitted?
They were never billed. They are, under the statute, the telephone companies, I said, they stand astride the headwaters of the revenue stream. They're right there, and they are charged with the duty to bill, to collect, and then remit these fees. Unless you bill the fees, you obviously don't collect or you don't remit. And they were not billing the fees. That's why, when we see these telephone bills and we see, 3 surcharges for 350 phones for, the most outrageous example, for example, that's where there is, even with the discounts, say that was supposed to be 200, but you're 197 underbilled. And that's where this has happened. And it's almost exclusively with the commercial accounts,
Multi-line commercial.
which is the most competitive sector of the telephone business. And, the most attractive part of it, obviously, that, you have so many phones.
So I'm not going to ask you to point this out, but are there certain, major offenders here among, I'm not going to ask you to name the companies, but are there certain major offenders here versus some that try to do, try to collect what they were supposed to collect?
I would say yes, there are some that are more mischievous than others.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, we have some that have not been in different parts of the country billing anything. Others that are trying to grasp onto various theories, some of which we have already in the Alabama federal court case gotten the judge to agree that that their proposed interpretations are ridiculous. But they got very comfortable with the situation because, quite honestly, Pennsylvania is not alone with the inability until now to audit the telephone companies, and uniformly you have in each of these state 911 laws these confidentiality provisions, which they say, sorry, go away, this is proprietary information. And in fact, in the new Pennsylvania law, which did incorporate an audit provision given it to PEMA, we were aware in other states that the telephone companies had basically said, even with the audit provisions that you have, you're able to come in with here, there are federal, forget state, but federal privacy laws that take preeminence here, so we're going to cite them unless you have, under the federal privacy laws, either a court order or an administrative subpoena. So we were able, through our efforts, to get subpoena, the administrative subpoena power,
To put
just to
teeth-
address the federal, because we had run into this same situation in another state where they're trying to grasp onto whatever they can to avoid any kind of disclosure.
Yeah, but they're gonna make arguments about, you know, the language not being specific enough, but, you know, what does line count mean? And I mean, we're gonna have to run down that whole thing with them. But at the end of the day, you know, we're very certain that we've got the right interpretations.
Well, in a competitive market, you know, you should have a level playing field so that, you know, everybody's playing by the same set of rules.
Look,
And I had a conversation with the Verizon
Yeah.
lobbyist, who I've known for 30 years. It's not like he's a bad guy. He had no idea of any of this stuff, but he said to me in a moment of candor, he said, you know, all we want is a level playing field. We can do very well in a level playing field, but the reality is that with the breakup of the bells and so forth, and with the advent of cell phones back in the 90s, and this, that, and the other thing, and now we get into the PRIs and the VoIP technologies and so forth. And by the way, the whole commercial world is going toward the VoIP side. But with all of this, you need to get them pinned down here in terms of what they're doing, how it's being done. We now have the information to do that. And as I said, you know, you got not only damages that you're owed, but enhanced revenue streams that will we hope put you in good stead. Even with of course, you've got the additional now $1.65 under the new act. So, you know, it would be nice to see the Pennsylvania counties in a position where they can not only pay for their 911 expenses, but maybe sock something away for the coming enhancements, which you're going to have to fund. There's a lot of, as I look at county financial statements and so forth, a lot of what I see is just the operations side. And what I don't see is the debt service that you're paying on your general obligation bonds, which part of which has gone to put in place and to acquire the equipment that you need for your 911. So many cases that I've seen, you know, there's a $30 million expenditure that's been made for your 911 center and so forth. Well, if you take, you know, GO bonds and 20-year amortization and so forth, well, you're paying a couple of $1 million a year on the amortization of that debt, you know, and that's not even part of a lot of the financial statements, the 911 enterprise, if you will. You know, it's whatever, you have an operating deficit, but you also have your capital side that you're not covering, you know, so.
And there's big things looming in the near future.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there's the next generation
Right.
text. on the
Texting
phone,
and all that,
text.
yeah.
And there's like, you know, within the next 5 years, we'll probably be looking into radios.
That's,
Because nobody can make up their mind whether they want to be open source.
well, and there's better ways of following. I mean, one of the problems is just locating the personnel that are calling. You know, if they're on a cell phone or whatever, you know, certainly there's ways to do that now that you're going to be forced to employ at some point. But in any event, we're excited about the opportunity. We think that there's a real a win here for you all, and we'd love to be involved. You know, we're probably taking up a lot of your time, and you know, if you have any more questions, we're ready to go. Or if you have any questions later, you know, just give us a shout. But you know, we're making the rounds around the state, and we'd love you guys to be one of the people that we're working with.
Yeah, I have no questions. And I think some of this was answered, I just want to be absolutely clear on it. So the shortfall is that the telcos never assessed the customer.
Correct.
On this. It's not that they collected.
Yeah, we don't have to, that'd be criminal if they collected it.
Yeah.
There's only one phone carrier that we've run into that did that, and
But the customers they're paying the bills they received.
That's
correct.
Okay, all right, so it was never remitted because it was never collected.
Correct.
So any findings essentially are coming out of the telcos earnings.
You got it.
Okay, all right. So-
It's damages against the telcos for failing under their fiduciary responsibility to you.
All right. The one question that occurred to me is the information that you use for the audit, how readily available is that? And the reason I ask, and this is just a little slice of life episodes. We recently, in here, we had been handling some of the local Crime Stoppers operation, we have a phone account for that. We began transitioning it over to the organization that was formed to take over Crime Stoppers. So we had to deal with the local phone company to try to get it transitioned. It was a mess, and that's, they simply could not put their hands on all the information. And some of that was because we had United Telephone became Sprint, Sprint became Embark became CenturyLink, and there were acquisitions involved in there. You mentioned about the breakup of the bells. You've had a number of acquisitions, people getting into the wireless business, buying other wireless carriers, trying to combine computer systems.
You've got the
combining systems,
resellers
combining-
and the CLECs and I mean,
Right.
it's difficult, but we can get pretty close, and there's a number of steps that we'll go through with your 911 folks. The first thing we're gonna try and do is get your anti-alley data, which is the automatic number identifier, automatic location identifier, which is certain places it's held by an outside vendor, maybe, Intrado, I think it's called. Often it's held by Verizon, which makes it more difficult because you try and get that data from Verizon and they say, oh, no, we can't give you that, it's confidential, and then we go out and we buy what's known as line number portability information, which, all the numbers that have been ported from one carrier to another, they have to report to the FCC, so they have to keep that number alive, and we know those phones are active. There's a whole process that Roger and his team go through. I'll be the first to admit I'm not the computer scientist probably prepared to fully answer the question, but we can get a fairly accurate count. But probably the only way we're going to get to the real data is when we would get into discovery with the phone companies, where they'd have to start telling us, how many lines they actually have active in your county.
Yeah, I was part of a lawsuit a number of years ago, or a formative lawsuit that involved trying to petition information from the phone company. And it was incredibly difficult simply because they don't necessarily have the tracking to keep all of the information that was needed for that type
Well,
of
I mean, all we
investigation.
really need is to know what numbers are active. We don't, and if they're billing their clients for their phone lines, they're certainly charging them for an active phone line. So as much as they'd like to hide behind the fact, boy, this is really hard to get for you, it isn't. They know which phone lines are active. They're billing them every month.
Yeah,
So it's.
Just anecdotally, the resolution we had here with the Crime Stoppers phone was they simply couldn't track down, we were getting 2 bills, but we'd asked the service to stop, it didn't stop. They could not reconcile the records. They eventually just ate the cost of it and we were off to close our account. Because they said we simply can't track all of this back through all of the different changes that have taken place. So that's just anecdotal. I wouldn't be surprised if.
It wouldn't surprise me if we don't run into some of that, Commissioner. It just wouldn't surprise me at all. But we're going to get close to the proper line count.
Okay. What'd you say your recovery percentage is?
We get 40%, which is split between us and the legal team.
Anybody taking, are any counties working for less than that? We've done some audits of things here in the county before, and I've never seen a percentage that high.
Well, what I'll tell you is normally on a contingency basis, the law firm alone would be getting a third, generally under contingency. And then generally what happens is there's all the costs involved with the case, which would include hiring people like PRS to help them out, forensic accountants. What normally happens is that gets subtracted from the amount that is going to the county before the third would come out for the lawyers. So, at 40%, we think it really is the right number. We haven't been working for less anywhere else in the Commonwealth, or actually in Georgia or Alabama or Tennessee or anywhere else. Certainly it's worth your asking. I can't blame you, but you know, we're also in a position that if we started working less for, you know, Cumberland County, every other county that we've already got contracts with, we're gonna have to go back and.
It happens all the time, I can tell you that, so.
Well, I mean, what I can tell you is we're comfortable with the 40%, and we, you know, that's where we want to be.
Okay, I think that's all I have.
A couple of things. So just to reiterate, so we're all clear, this is done on a complete contingency basis.
Complete.
You find
Complete.
We need all of
Yeah, we're gonna pay for
No
the
fees, no
data that
costs.
we have to go purchase, we're gonna pay for the forensic accountants, we're gonna pay for, you know, all of our own travel, court costs, you know, stenographers, you know, deposition costs, you know, all the expenses that are involved are coming out of our pocket.
We had,
Which we've actually done you know, we've raised money to be able to provide for those costs, because on our own, which we expect, you know, this could go on for a couple of years. Now, there's always hope that, you know, that people settle sooner, but we think that the likelihood is, you know, it's such a big problem for them globally that they're gonna dig in their heels.
Is there any possibility there would be some type of, I don't know the legal term for it, but essentially a macro settlement with the telcos that would, I don't know if that'd be class action?
You know, the thing that's this is that a global settlement they've asked about, you know, well, Verizon has anyway. The problem is that each state is different. The acts are different. The rules are different. It's you know, the surcharges are different. You know, in Alabama, the surcharges range from like 90 cents to $5. You know, in Chicago, the surcharge on businesses is $3.40 per line. You know, it's different everywhere. So I don't know. It's going to be really hard to get to a global settlement. But
It makes running the whole recovery effort much less efficient because of the fact that we have a different statute in every state with different provisions, different definitions. A lot of the stuff comes down to definitions.
we may be able to get there in Pennsylvania.
Hypothetically, if there is a global settlement, what does that do to this arrangement to us?
Still be, you know, the 40% that we would, because we're going to be, we're, as far as we know, the only firm that's been able to, quite honestly, have the methodology to get the information that gets behind all the confidentiality and backup of audit provisions. So we're kind of everywhere, and we'll continue to expand that 20 states into more. But there won't be, there can't be. This is completely different from pick something, tobacco, for example, where you have asbestos. You have federal laws which enable judges to put cases together and so forth, but you have to have a commonality which can't exist here because, as I say, every statute has different definitions, and a lot of this is on the definitional side in your statute. You know, what is a line? What is a multi-channel facility and so forth. So every case is different. Every state is different. We tried initially talking to both PEMA and CCAP and others, saying, well, wouldn't it make sense to get all
And
the
we actually
counties
went to
together?
the AG's office.
We've gone to the Attorney General's office and so forth. While, and as you say, Joe, it's been several years that this has been priority number one for CCAP. As you mentioned, last year, there was a sunset provision which got extended for a year. And this came very close to getting extended again. And everybody, including Doug Hill and everybody else, was walking around on eggshells, afraid that this was not going to get done. Now it got done, but it's while we were going through this process, which only ended when Governor Wolf signed the bill on the 29th of June. But up until that time, nobody wanted to do anything to, quite honestly, offend the telcos or, this, that, and the other thing. And believe me, the drafting process for this
But I
was
think-
largely driven by the telcos. And even Doug Hill was not aware, for example, of the asbestos or the amnesty provision that was in the first draft when it came out. So it's been a complicated process. It's not impossible. As we sign up, we've got, as of next week, it'll be 6 or 7 counties. We're gonna have, we've got another 10 or so after that. And these are all the larger counties, so at a certain point, we'll have 20 counties, which will represent probably 90-some% of the line counts in Pennsylvania. At that point, having, PEMA, having CCAP, maybe it's all, but we're gonna be operating, quite honestly, from a position of strength, because we've gone out and talked to every single county at that point, and basically, have that 90% of the lines.
But to answer your question, it's not in the contract that there's some sort of a provision that would lower our fee if we get a global settlement. I mean, we just don't anticipate that being easily done. We're gonna have to file the lawsuits in each county separately and be prepared to fight, the phone companies in each county separately. Most of these carriers aren't in every county in Pennsylvania, and frankly, what you find is there's a lot of CLECs and resellers in these counties that are like small carriers that are only in some of the counties. So, the only place it might,
100 telephone.
it might be possible with somebody like, it might be possible with somebody like Verizon, who is like pretty global around the state. But even if we got to a global settlement with them, we believe it would be because of our efforts globally, that would have created their wanting to settle. So, right now that we're still expecting the 40%. We think it's fair, again, because it's, the whole cost efforts that we're gonna have to pay for and all the things that we're gonna do. We think the time involved is that certainly we've already put in and will continue to, justifies that. And we're prepared to do this 100% contingent. If we don't get anything, all these expenses that we've, had to pay is on us. So this is not gonna cost the county a nickel.
Just one final question. So the fact that by and large businesses or large organizations or institutions had been being underbilled, the burden then fell disproportionately for funding our 911 systems on individuals.
Correct. In 2 ways. One, they were getting billed properly,
Right.
and then their tax dollars for their homes and so forth that are funding your general fund were going to fund the 911 system.
But just, the last question is on top of that, now that sort of this variance has been discovered, is this wall between going after the businesses and organizations that were not billed before, is that pretty impenetrable? Now, I know you talked about the fact that it's damages. How airtight?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is there is certainly a remote possibility that the telephone carriers could, they'd have to get a court to agree to allow them to do this, I believe. Tim, you can back me up there. But there's a remote possibility that some court could allow them to go back and recover these dollars from the businesses that hadn't been billed in the past. We don't think there's any chance that the phone companies are going to do that because they lose their clients. The business would just, they'd move from Verizon to Comcast, who isn't going to bill them for that. So we haven't seen it anywhere where there have been settlements. I mean, to answer your question, I think that was your question. Is it possible? It's possible, okay? Is it going to happen? We don't think there's a chance in hell that the phone companies trying to go back and recover the dollars. by increasing the bills to recover going back 6 years from their business plans. We just don't think that's remotely a possibility.
These are for those of us here in this room, these are pretty significant numbers in the context of Verizon. I'm not going to say it's insignificant, that would be noticing, but the PR stain that would be on the telephone companies by trying to go back and recoup from businesses that, thought they were getting a bill and they were paying the bill and so forth. It would just be reopening the wound that, we think that will.
So the answer is, it's possible, but unlikely.
Let me, if I could just talk about, because I'm not a lawyer, talk about damages or what we, use the word damages. Is essentially what it is you're going to recover is the fees then that they should have been collecting under the law that, they didn't collect and didn't remit. So in other words, if they had the ability to identify how many lines there are, let's say within a particular business, essentially what you're going after in terms of damages is the actual amount that they should have, under the law, they should have been collecting.
That's correct.
Okay.
Should have been billed.
So there's no punitive damage here in terms of because you didn't obey the law, we're going to ask for this much more. This is just to recover what essentially were owed if they had done, if they had followed the law.
That is correct.
Okay.
Now, there are certain suits that we have in other states, which are, they're called KETAM or False Claim Act whistleblower suits, is probably how you would know them, that do have the provisions for treble damages and so forth. Pennsylvania does not have a False Claims Act statewide. There are Allegheny County, Pittsburgh, and Philadelphia have False Claim Act ordinances, so that there are KETAM actions that may be available there, but none of the other counties in Pennsylvania have that ability for us to even consider a suit that would have kind of treble damages.
So yes, your understanding is correct. We're just going back and saying, this is what you should have been billing. You didn't, you owe us. You owe the county.
There's no penalty has.
And of course, they'll make their argument that, well, we have no way of knowing, or they're going to come
They're
up
gonna
with
have
all
all- yeah,
kinds, they're going to come up with all kinds of reasons. So whether or not you're successful or not, the mere fact that we would do this and other counties have done this going forward, you think that Delco is going to be more careful in terms of?
You'd certainly hope so. And what I'll tell you is that PEMA now has real teeth in an audit capability. Now it's only PEMA that has that ability. The county can't audit the phone companies. It's going to be PEMA, who under this new law is collecting all of the surcharges. Okay? But we've had dialogue with PEMA. I mean, they intend to, audit these guys to make sure they're collecting the right amounts. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that under the new act, if they start collecting properly, particularly for VoIP, where they've been collecting so much less than they should have been, that if they get anywhere near to collecting the right amount, even under the new VoIP law, which is actually limits their line count to some degree, you should get more money. I mean, it should happen hopefully quickly.
Well, some of us were disappointed in that, the legislature stopped at $1.65.
Yeah.
The Commissioners Association was looking for 2. And, just inflation, I think, since the last time it was adjusted, just for inflation, would have brought it to like 175 or something like that, as opposed to 165. I'm going to take a closer look at this and consider, I'm going to discuss it at the workshop.
It's on the agenda for tomorrow.
I will just say that I'm leaning in support of it, and I'll tell you why. Because our fixed income seniors and our individual consumers, have been funded this, and then as you said, they're also paying their real estate taxes. So, I mean, they're paying more than they should have to right now because the telephone companies, didn't do what they were supposed to do under the law. So, if there's a way to recover that in some way, shape, or form, I think it makes sense. But again, I want to take a closer look at this and consider it between now and then.
Well, and let us, any questions, please Larry or any of you, please just, please feel free to pick up the phone. If I can't answer or Tim can't, perhaps Roger Snyder can, who will be working on what's going on, and frankly, he'd be happy to come up and sit down with you or one folks at some point. He just was busy today, but we'll look very much forward to working with you.
Well, I know this has been discussed by some of our commissioner colleagues, and I picked up on it earlier this year, from both our Falcon County colleagues and our Lancaster County colleagues. And then, I'm grateful to Chief Clerk for following up and looking at this, and so hopefully we're not too late, and that we can maybe move forward here. So.
One of the things that I did leave with you all was a kind of a media package on some of the media that's been out there in terms of both the written press and in the on the television stations. And we do have a PR firm that we've been working with that would be happy to help set up any kind of PR arrangements if you guys are interested in something like that if you decide to move forward.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.